Now, as I said earlier in the show, migration is becoming an acute vote-driving issue because no one ever voted for a big Australia, and yet here we are paying the price for it. Australia's migration intake hit record numbers in January, despite the Albanese government's plan to slow the surge of new arrivals. Joining me now is macro business chief economist Leith Van Onselen. Leith, thank you so much for joining us. 125,000 permanent and long-term arrivals landed here in January. That's the highest on record. How did we get here?
Yeah, so that's the arrivals. The number I look at is actually the net number, so that's also arrivals minus departures. But either way, it was an extraordinary number. So we had 55,000 net arrivals in January, which is the highest January in history. It's also, compares to 21,000 January last year when obviously we ran up record immigration. And when you pair this with the latest national accounts data, which suggested that Australia's population grew by 680,000 last year, what it basically tells you is that migration is still picking up. So as you might remember, Danica, the Albanese government said that they'd lower immigration this year. The budget projects 375,000 net overseas migration this financial year, so to 30 June. Looks like we're going to smash that out of the water because all the data we've received to yesterday says that migration's still rising and that it's, could have hit 550,000, last calendar year perhaps, because it's still rising.
Look, it's just extraordinary. And we've got a situation where, of course, the rental market's tight, people are being squeezed out of the housing market. And the reality is, Leith, is that in terms of construction of new dwellings to keep up with it, well, they can't keep up with this current demand.
No, look, it's an absolute shocker. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics released data to the last calendar year this week. And what it wasn't construction, it was actually net dwelling additions. So that's construction minus demolitions, etc. So it just basically adds up the increase in the housing stock. And what it showed is that we only added 166,000 homes nationally last calendar year. And that's against a population increase of 680,000. So what that means is we only built one dwelling, or only added one dwelling for every 4.5 new residents. And that there is the reason why the rental vacancy rate has collapsed to an all-time low. It's why rents are going through the roof. It's why people have been forced to live on the streets and in tents. And it's why people have been forced to live in group housing and in severe rental stress. So the blame for this rental crisis is pinned firmly on the federal government, which basically decided to, open the floodgates, import more people into Australia than we can build houses for or infrastructure for. And that's really the question that every Australian should be asking of the Albanese government. Why did they do this?
Absolutely, completely poor policy, and they seem to have really hit the accelerator when it comes to the rate of migration in this country. Now, you mentioned the rental vacancy rate, and today we also found out that it's fallen to a fresh low in February of 1.07%. How long do you expect this trend to continue for?
Yeah, so it's going to get worse. So the data you point to is from PropTrack, and last week we got Domain, who released separate data. They measure it slightly differently, but Domain also showed that February was a record low for the vacancy rate. And basically, I think it's going to get worse because obviously we've got this very strong population growth ongoing through immigration. At the same time, the supply is actually falling. So the construction industry is completely bottlenecked. We've got higher labour costs, obviously high interest rates. And we've also got, builders now competing for labour against infrastructure from state government. So all this means is they're going to have less housing construction going forward at the same time as we're running this manic population growth, which is just spells bad news for renters. It means further strong rental increases, really tight vacancies, people being forced to live in group housing, becoming homeless, and obviously severe financial strain for renters.
It's not good news at all. Now, I want to ask you about the GST because a war of words between the states over the carve-up of GST has broken out again. I mean, Leith, we do hear this all the time, but here's New South Wales Premier Chris Minns and the Victorian Treasurer Tim Pallas today.
The only thing worse than Victoria taking our money is them crying about it afterwards.
A mathematically challenged New South Wales Premier, might I say. He might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but he is a tool.
Well, he called him a tool, Leith. I mean, we've resorted to name calling now, but realistically, no state will ever be satisfied here.
No, and unfortunately, look, I do feel some sympathy for New South Wales. Obviously, they're getting flooded with immigration, so is Victoria, but Victoria's had their GST intake increase significantly. New South Wales has had their cut. So I do feel some sympathy towards New South Wales.
Yeah, absolutely. And just finally, before we let you go, rates decision next week. What are you expecting here?
On hold, 100% on hold.
Okay, on hold. Well, that's some pretty positive news. Do you think that trend will continue?
Yeah, look, I think they'll hold for a few more meetings, and I'm still tipping rate cuts in the second half of this year, just as the economy weakens. We've got rising unemployment. Obviously, we've got per capita recession that we're all experiencing, and I think that's going to prompt the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates in the second half.
Yep, okay. Well, that's hopefully the case and hopefully some good news. Leith Van Onselen, always great to speak with you. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Danica. Anytime.